communist spy.
This is your assignment. See it through.
How did you become this?
The Sympathizer, streaming exclusively on Max.
Okay, everyone. Our mission is to provide complete balanced nutrition for strength and energy.
Ensure with 27 vitamins and minerals, nutrients for immune health, and Ensure Complete with 30 grams of protein.
Jerry goes off-grid almost every weekend, but now, a Friday last-minute meeting? Otter has Jerry covered with an AI meeting assistant to take notes and capture action items, so Jerry can go camping and be ready for Monday. Sign up for free. Visit otter.ai or download the app.
I was seeing this bra all over my Instagram feed. I'm sure you're seeing it too.
This is the most comfortable bra I've ever put on in my life. I love it because, one, it's not underwire. I hate underwire. It smooths out your back. It doesn't give you back fat or back rolls. You can wear this under a t-shirt and it wouldn't leave any marks or bulges. So not only is it super supportive, lifting and smoothing, but you have all that without an underwire and without a ton of padding.
So if you're looking at this and it's available, I promise you won't regret it.
Try risk-free with our 30-day fit guarantee at honeylove.com.
Look, she's just sitting here building her credit by...
I forgot you were here. Self gives you credit for the rent you were going to pay anyways and reports it to the credit bureaus within 72 hours. Free credit building for renters with Self.
Smerconish, next on CNN.
Identity is often tied to where we are or where we're from. Well, Will Maxon has many identities, and he works with concealed images in his art to reveal a bigger theme of identity and belonging.
I'm Will Maxon. I live in Houston, Texas, and I'm a painter. So the show is called In the Land Stand Still. I kind of came up with the title before any of the pieces kind of came together. I think the show is really just about kind of history and people's existing in space or their lack of existing. Growing up in a biracial family, you know, my father is African American, my mother is white, my family is Jewish, I'm Jewish. So all of these kind of identities, and again, this idea of rootedness and uprootedness, going and moving across country a couple of times, living in these different environments, again, really got me thinking about my belonging and got me thinking about like lineage and histories, you know, never feeling white enough, never feeling black enough. So kind of in a lot of these works, you'll see things kind of concealed or hidden rather than like some of the other work that I do is really about like intimacy and familiar relationships. This interesting line between the two. People exist, land exists, and we all kind of live in it together. And our interactions with the land is just as important with other people.
Will Maxon's And the Land Stand Still show is at the UTA Artist Space pop-up in New York on West 27th Street. It's up through Thursday. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you back here next Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Smerconish is up next.
Will Trump testify? I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. Opening statements come Monday morning in the first ever criminal prosecution of an American president. Donald Trump has said multiple times that he will take the stand. A week ago Friday at Mar-a-Lago, he was asked by reporters whether he would testify.
I'm testifying. I tell the truth. I mean, all I can do is tell the truth. And the truth is that there's no case. They have no case.
He repeated that plan yesterday outside the New York City courthouse where he's being tried. Of course, just because he says he will testify doesn't make it so. He's not required to testify. In his civil fraud trial last year, he said the same thing before he was scheduled to take the stand for a second time, only to cancel the day before. Yesterday, at his so-called Sandoval hearing, Trump was put on notice of the prosecution's desire to cross-examine him if he does testify on several specific matters, including the verdict in his civil fraud case where he was found to have inflated his assets, the E. Jean Carroll cases which resulted in verdicts for sexual assault and defamation, and a suit he filed against Hillary Clinton which was thrown out. Judge Juan Merchan will rule on the admissibility of that subject matter on Monday. The judge's ruling might cause Trump to reconsider his stated desire to testify. But depending on how the evidence comes in, Trump might have no choice but to testify. And here's why. Trump faces 34 counts of falsifying business records in connection with a hush money payment to a former adult film actress, Stormy Daniels. Jurors will have to determine whether the payment was a violation of state and federal election law, meaning that Trump paid the money for the purpose of silencing Daniels with an eye toward his re-election, or, as Trump would like to argue, that it was made to spare his family from embarrassing disclosures regardless of the election. The Wall Street Journal recently summarized the facts as follows. Ms. Daniels has said that in 2006, she and Mr. Trump had one intimate encounter. A decade later, as the 2016 election neared, Mr. Trump's fixer, Michael Cohen, paid Ms. Daniels $130,000 to keep quiet. A non-disclosure agreement isn't illegal. Mr. Bragg's complaint is about the paperwork. Mr. Cohen was reimbursed through 2017 via a monthly retainer disguised as a payment for legal services, the DA said. He padded his indictment by separately charging each invoice, check, and ledger entry to get 34 counts. Falsifying business records in New York can be a misdemeanor, but that statute of limitations had expired. So DA Alvin Bragg charged Trump with felonies which require a showing of intent to commit another crime. Bragg was only able to do that because COVID had caused an extension of the applicable statute of limitations for a year, during which time Trump was charged. Remember, assessing the alley-oop that all of this required is presumably why the feds passed on pressing this case themselves. So what's the second crime? Election interference. The claim that the payment was an undisclosed campaign contribution in excess of federal limits. Trump's defense? Probably that the payment wasn't campaign-related, but rather was solely intended to protect his family and reputation, notwithstanding the election. Prosecutors will note the timing, so close to the election. Trump's response, that's when Stormy Daniels sought payment. Here's the challenge for the Trump defense: how to get their version into evidence. There's one witness who is uniquely qualified to explain the motivation behind the payment: Donald Trump. But his taking the stand carries enormous risk. When he testified in the case where he was found to have inflated his net worth, the New York Times made this observation. In Justice Engoron's courtroom, Mr. Trump delivered a rally-made rant from the witness stand, marking the climax of a months-long proceeding that was alternately stultifying and scintillating. The former president attacked one of Ms. James' lawyers, saying, "You and about every other Democrat district attorney, AG, and U.S. attorney were coming after me from 15 different sides, all Democrats, all Trump haters." If Trump doesn't take the stand, he has limited means of getting his side into evidence. One alternative is through another witness. Michael Cohen is a possibility. But the question would need to be very simply and yet skillfully asked. Something like, Mr. Cohen, you can understand how Mr. Trump may not have wanted his family to know the reason for this payment, right? If Cohen agrees, that provides a sufficient basis for Trump's lawyer to argue that's why the true purpose of the payment was hidden, and that would spare Trump from testifying and facing a withering cross-examination. I wonder if Michael Cohen is prepared to answer that question, and how so, plus Stormy Daniels. If Trump's lawyers can get Cohen or another witness to acknowledge that Trump sought to spare his family, it would set the stage for a closing argument asserting Trump's key defense without him having to testify. But if nobody else says it, Trump may have no choice but to testify. No matter what Trump said in advance of the trial, whether he testifies will probably be a game-time decision. I want to know what you think. Go to my website at smirconish.com. Answer today's poll question: will Trump testify? Joining you now to discuss, CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Elie Honig, and Alan Turkheimer, an attorney who for the last 24 years has been a jury litigation consultant. He's worked several high-profile cases, including that of Martha Stewart. Okay, Elie, establishing intent is not easy for the prosecution either. How are they going to do it?
Well, Michael, they're going to do it through their witnesses. They're going to do it through Michael Cohen. They're going to do it through perhaps Stormy Daniels. They're going to argue Donald Trump's intent here was to interfere, of course, with the campaign, to hide the information, the allegation about Stormy Daniels' affair from the public. But I think Donald Trump's defense, I do not actually agree that he needs to take the stand in order to make that defense. I think he can do it, as you said, through the prosecution witnesses. And the closest example we have to this is the John Edwards trial back in 2012. He made a similar defense, ultimately successfully, where he said his team argued the reason for the payments was to protect against personal humiliation. John Edwards never took the stand. They managed to do that through the prosecution's own witnesses. By the way, the witnesses, Michael Cohen doesn't have to say Donald Trump wanted to protect his family. He won't say that. But as long as they establish that Donald Trump had a wife and children, and any normal human being would be embarrassed by this disclosure, that's enough for the defendant to make that argument.
They've got to make sure that they are dotting all those I's or putting all those pieces together so that in the final closing argument, his lawyer can stand up and draw on that. I'm saying that in the absence of any of that kind of testimony, I think it puts pressure on Donald Trump. Quick response from you on that, Ellie.
You're right, though. Defense lawyers are allowed to argue inferences. So are prosecutors. And I think that's a much safer way for them to do that. You go, folks, you know this man has a family. Any normal, common sense human being would be embarrassed about these allegations. That's what happened here. That's enough for you to argue.
Alan Turkheimer, if you had participated in selecting this jury for the defense, for Donald Trump, how would you be feeling right now?
I'd be feeling good. The anti-Trump sentiment is so prevalent in the county, and during the process, it came to the surface. So all the jurors who expressed that they didn't like Donald Trump, they didn't like what he stood for, they said bad things about him, he repels them, they're eliminated. Many of them self-eliminated. And then when it got down to the process, they answered more questions and they were given more targeted questioning. So finally, even at the point where the lawyers got to use their strikes, they got to get rid of another 10 other jurors. So at this point, it's looking like a good, open-minded, neutral jury. You have some business types. You have a couple people in finance or somebody in sales that might connect in some way with Donald Trump. There's 2 lawyers on the jury. So at this point, I think he's got to be feeling pretty good about the jury giving him and maintaining his presumption of innocence.
Ellie, you are a former federal prosecutor. How would you be feeling if you were the prosecution in this case?
I would be satisfied, but not overjoyed, Michael, for exactly the reasons that Alan just said. There are reasons for Donald Trump to be quite satisfied with this jury. I mean, I thought going into this week that we were going to end up with 6, 8, 10 jurors who basically fell into this mold. I really dislike Donald Trump. I would never vote for him. I'm a typical liberal Manhattan Democratic voter, but I will tell the judge that I can be fair and impartial. And can I really? Who knows? Instead, it looks like there's maybe one juror, juror number 11, who sort of fits that mold. And as Alan said, there's several jurors who might worry me from the prosecution's point of view, keeping in mind that this case, the evidence is middling at best. You've got 2 lawyers who are going to sort of systematically dissect this case. You've got some finance folks. You've got people who read the Wall Street Journal. You got a guy who read Art of the Deal. So I think I'd be mildly concerned if I was the prosecution here. But I agree with Alan. It looks like a solid jury that should be able to rule on this case fairly.
I'm really surprised that juror number 11 wasn't struck for cause after saying that Trump seems very selfish and self-serving. Let me put on the screen, Alan, something else that was quoted about juror number 11. I don't have strong opinions about him, but I don't like his persona, how he presents himself in public. I don't really agree with some of his politics, but that does not mean I can't be impartial. I don't like some of my coworkers, but I am not going to. But I can hear him out and understand his point of view and understand his issues. Alan Turkheimer, your thought.
The judge heard the jurors say that doesn't mean I can't be impartial, and I think that's all he needed to not dismiss this juror for cause. And Trump's team has to just hope that the other jurors rein this juror in if they go down a path that's bad for Trump. And there's some strong personalities on the jury, it would appear. And so they just have to hope that this juror can be open, as they said, and look at the evidence as it comes in and make a fair determination when it comes time to deliberate.
Alan, is a person in your role as a jury consultant finished now in a case like this until you get to question the jurors when it's over? Or do you play an ongoing role advising counsel as to how to pitch their case?
We would advise counsel. We'd certainly help them craft for opening. Now that the lawyers, we know the audience.